Welcome to the Pylon YouTube channel. It's your boy Mike back at it with another fantasy football video. If you found this little channel, you have found your ticket to winning your fantasy football league. That is no slight. That is seriousness. Just because I think that there's a lot of fantasy videos out there. If you're like me and just peruse YouTube and watch a bunch of fantasy videos, it's all the same stuff regurgitated more often than not. And I think that the consensus takes are kind of getting out of hand, and a lot of them are just overvaluing and undervaluing a lot of players based off of pure data and analytics and not actually looking at the eye test or understanding just watching games and seeing that there are players who are much better than their situation or analytics dictate. We're going to talk about that in this video. These are my top 20 wide receivers for fantasy football and redraft formats. If you disagree with that, can't help you because we'll find out who is right by next year. Also, please ignore the mess and the baby stuff. Can't do anything about that. Sheesh. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video and talk about my top 20 wide receivers for the 2022 fantasy football season. Off the bat, this might be a surprise, but I have Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, currently ranked 20 in my rankings, wide receiver 16, ADP 36.4. All of these rankings in ADP are brought to you by Underdog because that's what everybody's using, and I think they have the most accurate ratings as of right now. This is controversial as for sure, but I don't think it should be as controversial as you think, in my opinion. Let's just look at the positives of Brown's situation. Immediate chemistry with Kyler Murray as they played together in college. The wide receiver one in an air raid offense for the first 6 weeks minimum, unless DeAndre Hopkins gets his suspension reduced. Will have all the opportunity in the world until Hopkins comes back. Finally has his place as a wide receiver 2 in an offense, which he has always been. Let's not get it twisted. Marquise Brown is a glorified wide receiver 2 that has been playing wide receiver 1 with the Baltimore Ravens since he's been drafted. Now let's look at some of the negatives that I think drastically outweigh the positives. Hollywood Brown is just not that guy. Like, he's not an alpha wide receiver 1, and I don't think he should be viewed as such, despite the situation. He's never finished above wide receiver 22 in PPR formats, which is his highest finish. His highest finish was his wide receiver 22 in PPR formats. When Hopkins returns, Hollywood will become the number 2 in this offense. Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins' chemistry is not going anywhere. And, in my humble opinion, Marquise Brown has a slight drop issue. We have seen, especially if you're a Ravens fan, you know this. Time and time again, Hollywood Brown folds in big situations, and he keeps chirping like, oh, I want to go into a system that's going to value my ability as a receiver. Well, he was the number 1 option and couldn't put up big numbers. Like, it's completely on himself that his stats and his stat lines, his game logs, are the way they are. Sure, the Ravens are a run-heavy offense, but Marquise Brown did have the opportunity to be an alpha wide receiver 1, and he's just not that guy. I think this is a generous rank 20. Despite being in the Cardinals offense, sure, Marquise Brown had a hot start to 2021, but he did fall off throughout the season, and I think that those are his true colors. Like, I think he's just a very good, if not one of the best wide receiver 2s in the league. At rank 19, I got my boy Rashod Bateman, currently going as a wide receiver 26, ADP 54.4. I think wide receiver 19 is the happy medium of all the outcomes for Rashod Bateman. I thought about this a lot, and a lot of content creators view Bateman as a massive breakout candidate for 2022, and I couldn't agree more, but I think they're undervaluing Bateman as a prospect, as an athlete, and a wide receiver. I think his breakout is going to put him well above where they have him finishing, currently going as a wide receiver 22. Bateman beat man, zone, and press coverages at an absurd rate. He beat man coverage in a success rate that is top 25% all time for rookies. And he's in an offense with 45% of his targets up for grabs. This is also a franchise that is all in on Lamar Jackson and all in on Rashod Bateman, being that they were comfortable enough with no number 2 receiving option to trade Hollywood Brown to the Arizona Cardinals after a not-so-good rookie outing from Bateman. Like, Bateman's season last year was not that impressive. There's a lot of reasons why, and I'm not holding his rookie season against him. He only played a handful of games with Lamar Jackson. Like, he didn't even play with Lamar last year, and he was hurt to start the year. The Ravens are all in on Rashod Bateman, and I don't see for any reason that as fantasy managers, we should not be all in on Bateman as well. like, I can't reiterate enough. There was no wide receiver 2 option. There still is no wide receiver 2 option. Their number 2 option on the Baltimore Ravens is James Proche, and they still traded Hollywood Brown. Why not keep Hollywood and make Bateman the one? I really think that the Ravens think that Bateman can be that guy by himself, and I totally agree with this. Bateman's floor to me is wide receiver 22, which is what Hollywood Brown finished last year. And I think he's a much better football player, a much better wide receiver than Rashod Bateman. Than Hollywood Brown. And, like, it's not even close. Now, this is probably my most this is easily the most controversial take in this series, but I will die on this hill. I have Tyreek Hill ranked as wide receiver 18. He is currently going as the wide receiver 9 with an ADP of 22.5. Excuse me. Tua and Tyreek's skill set could not be more opposite. All of those off-script plays and deep shots from Patrick Mahomes that put Tyreek into the tier of a wide receiver that he is, like, they just don't exist anymore. Tua cannot do that. Tua will not do that. There has never been an instance of Tua doing that. There will not be an instance of Tua doing it in 2022. Tyreek's success will solely come from what he can do purely as a wide receiver after the catch and in Mike McDaniel's game plans or scripts. Like, the off-script stuff where the F it, Tyreek out there somewhere memes, like, those are gone. Because Tua's not doing that. Tua will never do that. Ironically, Tua's contemporaries, Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, are capable of supporting a full arsenal of wide receivers. In Herbert's case, some with less talented wide receivers. Tua cannot support 2 wide receivers in this offense. I don't care what anybody says, and I will die on this hill until I am proven wrong. It's either going to be Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle that succeeds in this offense at a high fantasy-worthy level of where they're being drafted, and I don't think it's going to be Tyreek Hill because we have unquestioned, documented chemistry with Jaylen Waddle. Tua played with Jaylen Waddle in college. Tua just had Jaylen Waddle break the rookie reception record in the NFL. I understand Tyreek Hill is viewed as a more dynamic receiver, and he probably is. I'm not saying he's not. But Tyreek was also playing with Patrick Mahomes in an Andy Reid offense. I don't think a lot of people know this, but Mike McDaniels has never called a play in an NFL game. Kyle Shanahan was the one handling plays in San Francisco Mike McDaniel's entire career that he's been there. His whole tenure with San Francisco, he has never called a play. Now he's going to be in charge of calling plays, and we are going to see if he can do it. I think that with Tua's skill set and what we've seen from Tua, there's no shot he could support 2 wide receivers at an elite level for fantasy football, and the only one I have faith with him supporting is Jaylen Waddle. Because we've seen what Jaylen Waddle could be in this offense with Tua. Yes, it's a new offense, but Tyreek Hill's success has come from off-scripting and being an elite receiver with arguably the biggest arm talent in football, and that just, that's not in Miami. That is not there. So I'm off Tyreek Hill. I'll let everybody draft Tyreek Hill. I don't care. I would definitely sell high on Tyreek Hill. I just don't think he's going to be that guy in 2022, and if I had to have a hot take, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, wide receiver 18, I got Tyreek Hill. At wide receiver 17, rank 17, I got Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton is currently going as the wide receiver 17 with an ADP of 37.1. And I'll be honest, as much as I love Sutton this year, I do worry about him arguably the most on this list because I'm not really worried about Tyreek Hill. I think I'm right about Tyreek Hill. But if someone who I have stock in and I have a positive outlook for 2022, I worry about this one the most. And a lot of my faith in this take is coming straight from my confidence in Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett, if you don't know, is the new head coach for the Denver Broncos. And I have Sutton lower than Jerry Jeudy on this list because of the large talent gap I believe is between the two players. As fantasy managers, our hope for Courtland Sutton lies in a few things. First being, in 2019, Courtland Sutton checked in with a 68.5% success rate versus man coverage and a 69.1% versus press coverage. And if you don't know where I'm getting these stats from, I should have mentioned it in the first video, but all of these stats, success rates, are from Matt Harmon's reception perception. If you want to check out and more in-depth analytics for wide receivers, I would highly recommend checking out his website. I'll link it in the description below. In 2021, Sutton's success rate went down the drains, dropping to a 60.3% success rate versus man and a 62.1% success rate versus press. Granted, and point two of why we should have faith in Courtland Sutton, Sutton is now a year removed from the ACL injury. If you don't know, Courtland Sutton tore his ACL in 2020 and played his whole season last year in 2021. Sutton is now a year removed from the ACL injury that held him out entirely of the 2020 season. And point three, Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, I do believe, can bring out the best in this offense. It's going to be a more pass-centric offense. It's going to flow through Russell Wilson, and I'm not too worried about Sutton's success rates, even though I just listed them as reasons why you should be worried and have faith in Sutton. I do believe that separation analytics and those types of analytics, like I talked about in the beginning of eye tests, when you evaluate a wide receiver and see, he's not separating at a high level or he's having low success rate on X, Y, and Z routes, it doesn't matter if he's a contested catcher. Being that few receivers in the NFL are successful contested catchers, some being Kenny Golladay when he was on the Lions, Allen Robinson basically his entire career, and I do believe Sutton falls into this category and will have success in this offense. I do worry, though, of his capabilities post-ACL tear. I like Sutton a lot. I have a lot of confidence in Sutton. I have a lot of shares of Sutton. I definitely would draft Courtland Sutton, but I think there are receivers I would take before Courtland Sutton. Coming in as my wide receiver 16, currently being viewed as, by consensus, the wide receiver 23, and with an ADP of 48.3, is Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson was a complete bust for fantasy in 2021, but like everything, we have to look at context. And I think that is probably one of the most overlooked things when just analyzing data and analytics is we forget to look at context as well. So for analyzing Allen Robinson for me was it actually Allen Robinson who sucked, or was it a case of the Matt Nagy's? Looking at some of the numbers, it definitely was a case of the Matt Nagy's. Allen Robinson's success rate ranked in the 81st percentile against man coverage and 96th against press coverage. So it was not his fault that he sucked in fantasy last year. It was completely Matt Nagy's fault, and I guess I would also say it was Justin Fields' fault, but I think that the Bears did everything possible to not let Justin Fields succeed. I think it's very crazy that Justin Fields is also being written off as a bust, while every other year two quarterback going into this year has X, Y, and Z excuses except Justin Fields. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's accurate, and I'm excited for Justin Fields going into 2022. Is he going to break out? Probably not, but I think they're setting the table for him to break out in 2023. But anyways, Allen Robinson is now on the Los Angeles Rams, and I think this is probably the most overlooked acquisition of the entire 2022 offseason, being that Allen Robinson, as the stats show, was a very successful wide receiver in 2021 from a pure success rate standpoint. Now we're pairing him with Matthew Stafford, who just gave Cooper Kupp a triple crown. Now, he didn't do it all by himself. Cooper Kupp is that guy. But Allen Robinson will be a successful player in this offense. And like I mentioned in the top 10 wide receiver videos, I think Allen Robinson is going to dip into Cooper Kupp's red zone target share, which was at a 69.44%. I think that's going to dip, and Allen Robinson is going to see an influx in volume in red zone targets, which he did not see last year because the Bears were never in the red zone. I'm high on Allen Robinson. He's definitely someone I'm targeting, and I have targeted in a lot of my drafts. But with all of this, you could decide whether you think Allen Robinson is that guy and is worth the draft pick. At wide receiver 15 in my rankings, currently going as wide receiver 19 with an ADP 39.4. One of the most disrespected and underrated wide receivers in the NFL. This is a hot take. I don't think so, because it'll happen eventually once he gets a real quarterback. I think Terry McLaurin is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL from a pure football standpoint. I think that Terry McLaurin, what he's done in the situations he's been given, is unprecedented. I think that if you put him with Matt Ryan, you put him with Matt Stafford, you put him with anybody that's not the quarterbacks he has played with, he would have an insane stat line for a season. No one hates Terry or even tries to discredit his accomplishments, but if you gave him a quarterback like Matt Ryan, like I just said, for 1 year, he would be in the top 10 conversation with zero hesitation. I have him high. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver. I think he's unreal. He's an unreal route runner, unreal contested catcher. The list goes on, but he has never had an opportunity to succeed in the NFL given his quarterback play. Terry McLaurin like I said, is one of the best contested catchers in the NFL and will be playing with the best quarterback in his career this year, and that's no disrespect to Alex Smith. Carson Wentz. Anyway, I believe Terry McLaurin is on the cusp of being widely viewed as a top 5 NFL receiver, and in my opinion, has been for the last year, at least the last year now. He's undoubtedly one of the best route runners in the NFL. Terry ranks in the 94th percentile in success rate against man and press coverage, while ranking in the 64th percentile against zone. Say what you want about Carson Wentz, but he is good enough to make Michael Pittman. He was good enough to have Michael Pittman finish as the wide receiver 17 in PPR formats in 2021. And Terry McLaurin is unquestionably a better wide receiver than Michael Pittman. And for the first time in Terry McLaurin's career, there is a legitimate wide receiver 2 option in this offense. If you've watched my mock draft videos that I did all draft season, I had Jahan Dotson. His player comp for me was Terry McLaurin. So now that you basically have 2 Terry McLaurins in the same offense, I think this is the year McLaurin finally flashes what his true ceiling is. I think he can finish easily as a top 10 wide receiver, and rank 15 is his floor. Now, this is a spicy take, I will admit, but I have Drake London at rank 14, currently going as the wide receiver 37 with an ADP of 76.1. I just think that his current consensus ranking is ludicrous. Drake London, in my humble opinion, can be on the same level as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Now, you could be saying, Mike, that is insane, but let me explain. Let's just look at some of the facts. Drake London had 88 receptions for 1,084 yards, 12.23 yards on average, with 7 touchdowns in only 8 games. London single-handedly put Kedon Slovis in the first-round conversation for 2023, and Slovis is horrible. He is not a good quarterback, and he will not be in the first-round conversation come draft season for 2023. I promise you that. London had a 72.8% success rate versus man coverage. That falls in the 73rd percentile among charted prospects in reception perception history. So he is an elite prospect. His 70.5% success rate versus press checks in at 68th percentile. To put it into perspective, in college, Jamar Chase finished with a 73.2% success rate versus man and a 71.8% success rate versus press. There are near identical similarities between London and Chase. Now, I understand they played in 2 completely different college conferences, but I do not doubt London's talent based off of the tape I've watched with my own eyes. Like, he passes my eye test. Also, if London could get the job done with Slovis under center, I do not doubt he will unquestionably get the job done with Marcus Mariota, who is unquestionably an upgrade over Kedon Slovis. Drake London's probably going to see a bajillion targets in Atlanta. And I do think that Desmond Ridder will get the start this year, and Desmond Ridder was my QB2 for this past 2022 draft class. I think Desmond Ridder has potential to be a legit NFL quarterback, and we could see a large uptick in London's production when it transitions from Mariota to Desmond Ridder when it happens. It'll probably happen around week 9. That's my guess. Week 9, week 10. After the season's completely over and the Falcons have secured a top 3 draft pick. I think that London is in an offense where he is poised to succeed here this year and going forward, being that he's going to have Calvin Ridley back next year and he has Kyle Pitts this year. So this is one of literally the largest receiving cores in the NFL, just on pure human size. I love Drake London. I think that he is. I'm not saying draft him as the rank 14 wide receiver. I think this is where he could finish, and I have targeted him in all my drafts in the 7th and 6th round if I had to reach on him. Coming in at my wide receiver 13, I have Terry McLaurin. Jerry Jeudy. He's currently going as wide receiver 22, ADP 48.0. I think Jerry Jeudy, if I remember correctly, was widely viewed as the best wide receiver prospect in the 2020 draft class and has by no means lived up to the 15th overall selection. Don't get me wrong. But in year 1 of Jeudy's career, he dealt with a drop. He had a pretty bad drop this year. I think he led the NFL in drops. But also even worse, he had Drew Lock throwing him the ball. However, Jeudy was a tremendous route runner with an exceptional success rate against press, man, and zone coverages. I think Jeudy, at the beginning of last year during week 1 against the Giants, really reassured me personally about what I believed in Jeudy as a prospect. Unfortunately, Jeudy suffered a high ankle sprain and missed 6 games and did not look as polished in his routes as he did as a rookie. And high ankle sprains is probably one of the worst injuries a wide receiver could have. Just being able to pivot and turn off of that ankle, it becomes exceptionally hard. This year, he has already confirmed he is completely healthy. He's a year removed from the injury, and with Russell Wilson under center and a revamped offense looking to be more pass-heavy, I think Jeudy is poised for a monster year. Where I go back and forth on Jeudy and Sutton, I think that Jeudy will lead the team in targets and receptions and potentially yards, but I think Sutton will dominate the touchdown, the share of touchdowns. This one, I understand if you have an issue with it, but this is based off of what I believe Jerry Jeudy could be. I think can be, and his rookie year shows he was one of the best route runners in the NFL. And I think that he was carrying that into 2021 before he rolled his ankle against the Giants week 1. I love Jerry Jeudy. I think he is an absolute monster, and I think he has a very, very high ceiling in the NFL. Hopefully his route running returns to normal, and his drop issue is no longer relevant. At rank 12, I have Jaylen Waddle. And you could be saying, Mike, Tyreek Hill's there. How could you have Waddle this high? Blah, 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 blah. Well, at the wide receiver 18, ADP 38.6, I personally am fading the Dolphins receiver core in all formats because I think there's a very good chance they both finish outside the top 20, which is absurd, but I'm sorry. It's just how I feel. And Dynasty, completely different story. But this is redraft formats. Waddle's status in my rankings has literally nothing to do with my faith in Tua. It's just what I know that Tua is and was good enough to have Waddle finish as a wide receiver 13 in 2021 in what was primarily a defensive-focused team with no wide receiver 2 option. I do have big-time concerns about Mike McDaniel as head coach, and this is his first stint ever as head coach, and he may have been the offensive coordinator in San Fran, but he was never in charge of calling plays in a real NFL game ever, like I mentioned before. Waddle was one of my favorite prospects coming out of the draft in 2021, and I think he could be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL at some point in his career. In a new offense that takes advantage of the speed in the offense, being that they have Chase Edmonds, Cedric Wilson, Tyreek Hill, and Raheem Mostert, all of these top speed guys in the NFL, they're in the top percentage of speed overall in the NFL. I do think the opportunity for Waddle to continue to be a high-volume target and see an uptick in touchdowns this year is definitely on the table, which is why I think that if Waddle was good enough as an unquestioned one in a poopy offense last year, now with a ton of weapons for defenses to account for, Waddle can definitely finish higher than he did last year with a huge uptick in touchdowns. I think there also is a case to be made, and I'm surprised this wasn't on social media yet, that Waddle is actually faster than Tyreek Hill, but the point remains they're very close in terms of speed. And I think that defenses are primarily going to have to operate around Tyreek Hill, given what he's done in the past, as opposed to Jaylen Waddle, and I think that's a very good thing for Jaylen Waddle's success outlook. Coming in as rank 11 in my rankings, wide receiver 13, ADP 27.5. To consensus, I have Keenan Allen. Part of the reason I have Allen this high is because I think that Herbert is going to elevate his game to another new height, and for him to do that, it'll be through Keenan Allen. And let me explain. Mike Williams saw career heights in 2021 and earned himself a 4-year extension with the Chargers. However, I have my own doubts about Mike Williams as a pure wide receiver and don't trust him to be able to duplicate his 2021 success. Mike Williams historically has not been a successful wide receiver in the NFL. He was with Justin Herbert and his Brandon Staley offense, but I think Keenan Allen is a much better receiver, and even if we analyze those breakout games that Mike Williams had, Keenan Allen was just as successful in those games just based off of his pure target volume alone. Herbert has more than enough chemistry with Allen to make him a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, and if Williams sputters at any point in this season, Herbert will lean heavily on Allen like he did last year, and Allen will continue to produce because he's always produced. I do think that this Chargers offense is going to be better than it was last year, and I think overall as a team, they're going to be better than they were last year, and I think that Allen is the safety blanket in this offense, which is why just on a pure target share alone, I don't think it's going to change. If anything, it'll see an uptick if Mike Williams struggles to get it going early in the season. But that's going to do it for this video. That's going to do it for my top 20 wide receivers. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you disagree, that's fine. You can call me an idiot. You can be as mean as you want in the comments. Just give me reasons. Don't say, like, Mike, you're an idiot. Because you can say, Mike, you're an idiot, ... That's fine. But if you say, Mike, you're an idiot, I'm just going to be like, why? And then ask you, why am I an idiot? And then we're going to talk about it. That happened a lot in my mock draft videos. But yeah, I'm totally open. You can hit me up on Twitter. You can hit me up on Instagram. You can hit me up in the comment section. Highly encouraged. Yeah, if you have any comments, thoughts, concerns with these rankings, let me know in the comments. Let me know who I left out. Let me know who should be in it. Do all that stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that cool YouTube stuff. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.